the distinction there is that, so I noticed there's things on your car that I have done to lighten my car. And maybe in this particular example, it has to do with minimum weight requirements or something like that for the series that car was built for. But you take an so-called unlimited build car, and usually it's built by the amount of man hours that a company is willing to pay to have a car prepped, right? Versus time to me is free. As I've built my car, it hasn't ever been limited by the amount of man hours that I'm willing to pay someone else to cut stuff off the car for lightness, for example, right? So there are advantages there, right? You bought a car that has amazing suspension work done. There's absolutely value in even just paying for the knowledge of what they did to prep the suspension on your yellow car. But it's also limited in what the build cost was because that company had to pay employees for man hours. Me not having to, that's not the limiting factor for me. So
sure.
This kind of things I thought about looking at your yellow car in terms of the built not bought kind of thing.
Well, and it's kind of related to that. One of the takeaways that we've had here, especially with the Pikes Peak car, is there's like what the hope would be is if you're buying a race car that's already been built and already been used, that there's hopefully they have a lot of good solutions to problems that you might well run into. The interesting thing that we've run into with the Pikes Peak car is like if we had it to do over right now, if we had another shell right now today that we just had to build the same car, but we could start fresh now, we would do a lot of things differently than we did initially.
Me too. Yeah, absolutely.
And so I guess that's one of the tricky parts about coming into it from zero and building the car up to that point is you're going to learn a lot along the way. And the hope would be that if you're buying a purpose-built race car, that maybe they've found some solutions to problems that you don't even know you're going to have yet, but they might not. And so like the simplest one for us is the cage design. Like if we had it to do over, we would have a whole different set of requirements for the cage. The cage that's in the Pikes Peak car is actually an FIA plus spec cage because at the time Pikes Peak had a lot of additional requirements even above and beyond what the FIA spec would be. So it's a very thoroughly built cage, but we did not optimize like the ability to get in and out of the car. Like getting in and out of that car is really difficult, and it's because of some of the choices that we made with the cage. So and then also from a weight saving standpoint, kind of like what you were saying, Tasso. We learned, and it's a shame Scotty's not with us on here, but he did some crazy stuff to save weight. That once he figured out like how much weight was hiding in like the B pillars and the C pillars of the car, just because of the reinforcement that once you put the cage in there you don't need, or you need minimally, that he saved. I mean, if we built that same car today, we could probably save at least 150 pounds with a new build versus what we currently have. And now that
as long as the class allows that.
Correct. True. And as long as we have the cage in the car, we can't. I mean, there's nothing that we can do to go back. Now that ship has sailed. So that's one of those. Those are two really big lessons that we've learned since that car was built. And so, like, yeah, I don't know. It definitely would do it differently. And so I don't know. I guess it maybe falls in between.
Sure.
Between both.
Yeah, you're paying for someone else to make those mistakes so that you don't have to pay to do it twice.
Sure.
So there's absolutely value there. And I'll say that I'm not thoroughly on the fence one way or the other in terms of built or bought. Well, I am thoroughly on the fence. I'm not thoroughly, I'm trying to say, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm at the point now with my own build where the amount of effort I have to go to save, half pounds, whole pounds, stuff like that. I've almost debated cutting out the cage that I have and starting from scratch to do it lighter and better and for better chassis rigidity. Now that adds, we're talking several $1,000s in a recage for a car, right? And a lot of work and time. So I don't know. I probably won't. At the time when I built the car, I figured I would wrap it around a tree before I ever got to that point where I needed to, make that little performance increase. And it hasn't. And I'm kind of waiting for that to happen. So then I get to start another car from scratch and I'll take all these lessons with me. But I don't know.
Yeah.
It's there's obviously not an answer one way or the other that stands out to me.
And maybe the lesson is, like, before you would buy a purpose-built race car, there, like, I guess the other angle that I would come at with all of what we just described is, like, if you could go out and rent a car, like if you're looking at getting into rally, if you can go out and rent a rally car and participate in even just one event, so that you actually have a feel for, getting in and out of the car. Okay, what is it like, having to change a tire on stage or after stage, but without your support crew. Just a lot of, like, living with the car for a little bit. You're going to come at looking at a purpose-built car from a different way than if you're coming into it kind of blind. And that's where, like, I have a whole bunch of different things that I would come in and look for. And if I was going to be buying a car now, with all of the experience we've been through with the Pikes Peak car and the rally car as well, just to make sure that it's done right, so that you don't have to do like what Tasso is saying necessarily, and kind of, even though it's built, take it apart and kind of start over. But I don't know, Ryan's moving around here, but
Yes.
about your car, Ryan. Yes, now he's getting in the car.
Oh,
There it is.
So with your car, there's a flip side to that, which is you might buy a car knowing that you have to do all of this stuff, but even knowing you have to do all of it, it's worth it, because you know that your car has air jacks. Like,
Right.
that's something where that is not something easy to install. Maybe you need it, maybe you don't, but now you have it, so you can see how it works. If you ever decide to put it in the other blue car, you're going to learn a lot from just having those. Like, there's a huge value in buying the car that you have with all of the modifications that are done to it, because it will get to where it needs to be with, a relatively modest amount of work. But I think you're still going to come out way ahead with it.
Yeah. And a lot of that too, and I think this is fair to say, whenever you are buying a car as a race car, making sure that you look at the actual cost of the vehicle that you're buying and the value of it as well. So when I was looking at this car, knowing that the cage was going to have to be totally redone, I reached out to my cage builder and told him, like, hey, like, this is what I'm looking at. How fixable is it? What kind of cost are we thinking? And this is what I'm looking to purchase the car for. Do you think it's a good value? And so I think it's important to go into that with like a square head on your shoulders, knowing what it is, kind of what your expectation out of the car is, how much it's going to cost, and then everything in between. You could make the argument that Tasso and I both bought built cars when we initially bought them, but we didn't buy them built as we've used as intended.
Right.
So, maybe, Tasso technically bought a national championship winning car for a rallycross, but that's not what he ended up doing with it, and so there are crossovers, like you're saying, as long as you're like intuitive to it. Because there's all the nightmares too. We could go over the nightmares of buying a built car as well. How it's assembled, how it's put together, and the not so fun mysteries that you find, when you look at one.
That is something worth mentioning for the build route also. Is there are a lot of things on my car that are only easy to work on because I'm familiar with how they go together and come apart and stuff like that. So that really intimate knowledge of all the little inner workings of your car, and all the little things you've done, if I were to go sell this car right now, I would have to tell the buyer, like, look, do you want to figure it out on your own? Or maybe I'll charge you an extra $1,000 to tell you all the little random shit going on in there that you probably should know about, right? Like, it has to come off this way, otherwise it's not going to come off, or, like that, or
Well,
You know, be routed like this.
what that makes me think of is wiring.
Yeah.
Wiring,
Oh man.
wiring for a race car.
Good luck.
Ooh, yeah. Well, there's a lot of, well, it depends. There's probably a bit of wiring that you're going to have to do to get a street car to be a competition car. But like once you have a competition car, like Pandora's box, I think, is a fitting description of what you might potentially run into with wiring. And
There's
it
a
can
point,
go either
right?
way. Yeah.
There's a point where a car becomes a nice enough or a high enough budget build with a bespoke motorsport level harness where the wiring is a dream at that point.
Sure.
Or comparatively, right? But I don't know about you guys, my car is not there. My
No.
car has, I've tried to make everything removable.
That's a good start.
So there aren't too many things that are literally hardwired to the car, but there are some things. I mostly factory harnesses, but they've all been taken apart and gutted. So like I know what's there, especially like the fuel pump controller and stuff like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
That system is completely crazy. In my situation, it works. It does what I need it to do. But to try and take that, or even I don't have a normal key like ignition cylinder because I love
Right.
fireplane switches. So I rigged up each of the positions on in the key cylinder to its own individual switch. So start the car, I like flip switch, right? And I love it. But I made a little sub harness for that. And that, well, for one thing, it's all just red wires because it's what I had around when I got the Anson to do that project, right?
We have made that mistake, yes.
So it's yeah. So I know how to take my dash off, but if one of you guys tried to figure it out, you would have to cut wires probably.
That has been the big joke too. There's four fuel pumps in this car, and then there's also 4 switches on this little dash here. And I have flipped all those switches to see if it would change anything, and I have no idea what the switches do.
Yeah.
For all I know, the switches are for telemetry and radio communication.
Right.
I have no idea. What they do.
And that's a factory
kinda
prepped car.
saying.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's not Tasso in his OnePlus car garage. That's a factory prepped car, and you're still thinking, the hell's going on here?
Have you taken the plate off and are they actually wired on the back as well?
They're just blanks.
It'd be hilarious if there was just extra switches for switches. You don't have to do it now.
To take some of this stuff apart. Yeah. Like. I'm just kidding.
Oh man.